Donald Trump has latched onto divisive propaganda regarding civil unrest in the country, and he's using this as a campaign strategy. There's no question about it. Some of his disinformation honestly reminds me of the type of stuff you would hear from North Korea or any dictatorial regime that uses this type of disinformation to further divide and conquer. And one of the more recent examples was from Trump's visit to Kenosha yesterday, Kenosha, Wisconsin. He purported to be speaking to a shop owner who lost his store, I believe it was a camera store, because of the unrest, because of the so-called looters and the violence in Kenosha. But it turns out that the actual shop owner was unwilling, had no interest in being part of Trump's propaganda tour. And so Tom Graham, who actually owns this old camera shop, that was leveled in fires last Monday after protests broke out in Wisconsin, told the NBC affiliate in Milwaukee that he immediately refused when the White House called on Monday, asking if he would accompany the president on a tour that would showcase the leveled business. He said no. The shop owner's like, not into it. In fact, he was quoted as saying, I think everything he does, meaning I think everything Trump does, turns into a circus, and I just didn't want to be involved in it. When Graham said no, according to Talking Points memo, it appears that a former owner of the shop, John Rhodey III, who lavishly praised the president's efforts, was featured instead. Graham told the local NBC affiliate that he has been the shop owner of the century-old Rhodey's camera shop for the past 8 years after he purchased the shop from the Rhodey family. Now, keep in mind that the shop owner's last name is pronounced Rhodey. That's relevant because Donald Trump, he loves using people for his own political gain, doesn't even care to check what the name of the individual is or how you pronounce it. But without further ado, here is Trump on his Kenosha, Wisconsin visit, prancing around with someone who doesn't actually own the shop that he's talking about.
So this store was here 109 years. Just about the oldest in the nation, doing what you did.
Oldest in the state, for sure.
It's fantastic. And we're gonna help them a lot. I think we're gonna help them a lot. Would you like to say something?
I just appreciate President Trump coming today. Everybody here does. We're so thankful that we got the federal troops in to help, because once they got here, things did calm down quite a bit. And our city police and sheriff and fire departments are awesome. They work harder than you can believe, 24/7.
That's true. These gentlemen did a fantastic job. Working with the federal government, and it was really great. And once we said, let's go, that was the end of it. Unfortunately, they had a few days when people wouldn't call us. They didn't want to have us come in. They just don't want us to come in, and then destruction is done. A day early, we would have saved your store.
Absolutely.
1 day early.
1 day early.
I just want to remind everyone that the federal government does not have the ability to just send in federal troops or federal officials in response to any type of unrest. The state needs to ask for it, right? So a common misrepresentation that you'll likely hear is that, the federal government took actions into their own hands and they wanted to help provide safety in these failing democratic states. Like, that's the narrative we keep hearing, but just understand how that system really works and how Trump literally does not have the ability to do that. So John, this is just one of the more recent lies that we heard from Trump in regard to the protesters. And unfortunately, this disinformation campaign is working.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, the whole thing just makes me absolutely disgusted. Everything that has happened from the beginning in Kenosha, from the original shooting on to, if he really wanted to safeguard people's lives, he could tell his followers to not go where they don't live, to defend property that's not theirs and murder people while doing it. That would be helpful. And he actually does have the ability to do that. He can actually go and say that, but instead when asked about these individuals, he's incredibly defensive about them, as is all of right-wing media. Yeah, to bring out the guy that doesn't even presently own it and imply that he's gonna help him, like, he can't help him because it wasn't his business at the time, but he wouldn't help him anyway. Like, who is anybody gonna check in a month to see if he gave the guy money or something? He's not gonna do that. He doesn't pay his own bills, let alone someone else's bills. And he wants to help out the guy. He's standing 2 feet from him, not wearing a mask. How careless, how cruel. And all of it, of course, is to generate a Twitter video mashup of him visiting Kenosha, the entire thing. I mean, I know presidential visits have long been PR, but it's so directly just about that they're just trying to create something that they can tweet out later that day. And I'm sure it's already up.
I mean, look, one of the best examples of how Trump actually doesn't care about providing aid to these businesses and to these communities that he alleges have been absolutely devastated by these protesters is the fact that he has said that he'll veto any type of stimulus legislation that includes funding for state and local government. And so you're right, he never actually wants to put any resources or action behind what he alleges he cares about. He likes to use people and exploit people in vulnerable positions for his own political gain. And in this case, we're not even talking about someone who's in a vulnerable position. Again, this person, Rhodey, does not own that shop and hasn't owned that shop for 8 years. And I think that's relevant to keep in mind as you see more and more of Trump's propaganda disinformation campaign. One other example, by the way, has to do with Trump's comments regarding Portland and how he has basically tried to paint this picture of Portland on fire. It's just completely burnt to the ground. I mean, his exaggerations have become so bad that the firefighters in the area felt the need to refute what he says. So the fire department in Portland, Oregon is refuting claims from President Trump that the entire city is ablaze at the time amid growing protests. So Lieutenant Rich Chapman from the Portland Fire and Rescue released a statement saying, "We are not ablaze in Portland. There is a very isolated pocket of demonstrations that have involved fire, none of which has been substantial enough to need more than one fire engine." So, it's just important to know what the facts on the ground are. And what the Trump campaign is trying to do is make people fearful of Black Lives Matter, to draw this false equivalency between BLM demonstrators and people who are looting or doing whatever. That activity is not indicative or illustrative of what BLM is out there doing at all, or what their message is. And what Trump is doing is very intentional. And the reason why I say it's working is because, as you'll see later in the show, Biden is now playing the role of defense, which is really, really frustrating because of Trump's disinformation campaign.
Exactly, and look, we can feel bad for the people who actually own businesses. I don't want anybody's livelihood being destroyed or whatever. And certainly old camera shops, how many could there possibly be anymore? Especially one that's been around that long. We can feel bad for that, but we can also call it out when he's clearly lying opportunistically about the state of Kenosha or Portland. I mean, he recently said that Portland has been on fire for decades, just the whole thing, and that's not. Even in the past few months, it's a small area around the courthouse that has had protests, let alone fires, not the entire thing. And it's one thing when incumbents lie about the state of the country to imply that things are better. Like if they pretend, for instance, that a pandemic isn't happening or that the economy hasn't been destroyed. That's dishonest, and I don't like it. But it seems way scarier, way darker when they lie to imply things are worse. Like that there's more chaos, more violence, more fires. What sort of prospective government would do that? Like a democratic one, a representative one? No, they wouldn't do that. Only a really sick, dark, authoritarian government would pretend things are far worse and more apocalyptic than they are to get reelected. And that is clearly the path he's going down. And I, like you, I don't like that Biden seems to be stepping so eagerly into that trap. But yeah, this entire trip has been a farce, if a farce can be as scary as this.
Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.